Okay, so last step of this whole baking process before we can start texturing. I'm going to load my low poly version of Luna. I'm going to give this a 2048. If your computer's running slow, you can still run at 1024. I just feel like I'm putting everything into one map. I want to keep it 2048. I want to make sure things aren't overlapping with each other. Leave everything else exactly the same. And let's discard this little scene. And here is my Luna. So what I can do now is go to my bake maps. I'm going to set this to 2048 because that's the resolution I'm working at that I just chose. I'm going to set Luna High as my source. And just like before, turning everything off but normal. And sometimes when I'm doing normal too, like if I want to speed things up, I might just start with a 1024. I'm going to start with what we call a 1K map because I want to make sure everything is fine. So let's go ahead and bake. And yeah, it seems like things are mostly okay. Not so bad. I got a couple of like weird seams. You can see this happens when we get like overlaps and things. But I'm actually going to decide on a lot of this that I can probably live with a lot of these little like seam errors. So let's go back and I'm going to bake mesh maps. Let's set it to higher. Okay. Anywhere I'm running into any trouble, probably in the bake. I feel like my aliasing is pretty low. You can always bake it higher. I can set lowers like my max frontal and rear distance. I might make a little smaller. So let's see what happens if I cut these back a little bit. And let's change my anti-aliasing up now a little bit more to like 4. It's going to take longer to bake, but you can start to see it's a little less rough. And I'm getting fewer of those little artifacting and errors. I'm still getting some issues in here, like in my collar, which is something worth inspecting. This I'm starting to get some issues with, like the belt is just not quite close enough. I can see some of my stuff starting to clip. So I might need to, in my bake settings, change it up instead of 0.01. Let's set it to 0.02, just a little bit more space. You know, we're looking to minimize errors. Okay, that's a little bit more of a compromise. I'm not losing so much on the belt. I'm still having this weird collar issue. So if I come into here to 2D, 3D, see if we can kind of identify. You can see like the little dark or black spots are often where we're having issues. So the question is with this collar here, looking at my low poly model, going into my UV editing, see if we can identify some of the issues in here. Got this. Is this shape? Okay, this is that. Maybe I just want to split these off from each other. You know, maybe I need to keep these separated, or maybe I need to check to make sure. Let's set my filter so I can't select the high poly, but I can just see it. Like asking myself, how do these line up with each other? So there's my problem. I made a change to my collar. So you see my high poly, my low poly no longer line up. Somewhere in there, I must have made, I don't know when I did that. Maybe you caught it in the video and I didn't. But somewhere in my shirt, I made a change from my high to my low poly, and that's why it didn't work. So like our bake and the distance to it and like keeping everything together is really important. Otherwise, you get some weird baking errors like this. How do I fix that? All right, well, you know, there's a couple solutions we can take. I could just take the low poly, the shirt low, and copy it over. I could ignore the spot. I could take my high poly. So this is now I'm only able to select my high poly object, and I could try to force it to line up a little bit better. Let's do sculpt, make sure symmetry. G, maybe I just pull it a little bit. Try to get it to line up a little bit better. this kind of nudging can be kind of hard. But I could take the low poly version of my thing and just sort of recreate it. I guess though, but I guess I did do exactly that. Like I changed where things were lined up. So now that I've done that, let's take my high poly, select all this, and let's re-export my high, having chosen to make some adjustment to it. Let's reload my low poly mesh, or my high poly mesh, I should say. And now let's see what happens. Okay, yeah, so there's still a little bit, but we can see how much we fixed it by making that adjustment. So what's cool about this is it's able to, anywhere you see these errors or things like this that need to be fixed or patched, we can come in through here and make some adjustments or edits. Now, you might have noticed when I did these that all of these were named high and low. So this naming convention I used is pretty important. So in my high poly, let's not call this hair cap 3. Let's combine that into the hair like so. Apply these. And let's go ahead and apply these so I can just combine these in together in my high poly and they'll be nice and clean. So you notice I have hair high for HI, and then these are all undercase low. Well, this is a nice thing because I can actually match them using a nice little system that's already built in that's going to make all of this baking a lot more accurate. So under bake mesh maps, I have these low poly and high poly suffix. What this means is if I set, hey, my stuff that's low poly is called underscore low, meaning if it says belt low, it knows it needs to bake it to belt high, and it shouldn't bake it over the other things. This is a little bit more complicated, but this is how we're going to solve some of those little issues and errors that come in between things. So let's set bake, and I'm going to set both the 0.01. I'm going to set these back both to kind of their defaults here. And if I want to do default parameters, let's go there, common. Let's say, oh, unfortunately, there's no default setting thing here. So now I'm going to look for, in match, I'm going to say by mesh name, and it's going to look for high. It's going to look for low, and let's see what it looks like when we bake this. Nope, that didn't do anything. I must have... What did I click in here? Did something. Make sure I got my high. Great. I got my low. 2048. All this stuff here. Oh, I know why it's not happy. Because I have a high poly eyebrow and I don't have a low poly eyebrow. I need all of these to be the same. So I have eyebrows high and there's no high for the other ones. So I'm going to take my eyebrows, I'm going to apply these. I'm going to take my head, I'm going to apply this. And I'm going to combine these together so it's all under body high because all these need to match for that to work. Let's take my Luna high out, make sure it's all combined together. I'm going to remove this because I want to make sure I have just the high poly pieces. So all these, Luna high, export. It's going to take a second. Let's turn these off, turn on low poly, just to make sure I've got all these. Luna low, because this naming thing only works if I have the exact same number on both these and they have the same name. So project, and I need to reload my object. Okay. And then under mesh maps, let's reload my high. And now let's see if it'll do it. There we go. Kind of? No. Guess it's not liking it. Let's try always. See, this one's working fine. Well, let's do a little digging. Oh my gosh, I just figured it out. I spent last couple minutes being like, what am I going wrong? I gotta be going crazy. All of these are underscore high. And in here, under bake mesh maps, I had set it to underscore high. I just have to make sure they match. They're exactly the same. So whatever the naming is, it's very important. But what I'm going to show you this does now is it's going to now bake it much better. And what's cool is because I don't have to worry now. You see, notice like under the hair, I don't longer have that seam. I don't have seams in some of these other places, and it's much, much cleaner. So what's cool about this is this looks just like all the detail in my high poly model, but it's all in my low poly model. And it's, what, less than 10% of the original geometry that I had in here, and it's way easier to work on. So we'll be able to come in and paint on and add detail to it. Once you have this working, you go to Bake Mesh Maps, turn off Normal, and we click all of these, except for we usually don't need thickness, and we probably don't need ID map for what we're doing here. And you just bake the rest of them, let it roll. And there is our character, and we are getting ready to actually do our texture and create our final version of it. It's really exciting stuff. So I'll see you in the next one, which is where we'll actually get to texture this thing. I know unwrapping and baking is a big process. It's a lot of trial and error. If you have trouble, ask questions. You can reference this video. If there's any other links I can help you without, let me know. It's definitely weird. Do your best with it. If you have errors or little errors that aren't perfect, that's okay. We can always work with it. It'll be fine. You can see this one, you know, maybe there's some areas or two where there's like a little thing. But really when I do a lot of this stuff, it mostly turns out fine. And we have most of the details that we really want. Now, keeping it simple, everybody. Or at least trying our best. So thanks, everybody. Can't wait to see your textures.